Hello and welcome to BikeWale, and today we'll try and help you choose the better motorcycle for your needs between the Triumph Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400X. Now we'll talk about the genesis of the motorcycles, we'll tell you what the similarities are between the two, what the differences are, and of course how these are to ride compared to each other. So stick around. Now both these motorcycles have been thought of and designed by Triumph. But the execution of these motorcycles, the engineering, the testing, and of course the production has been handled by Bajaj. So it's all been done here at Chakan. And with local sourcing and of course indigenous methods, we've got a motorcycle that is great value in terms of pricing. But of course it retains the whole character in terms of look and feel of what we expect from Triumph. Now the idea with these motorcycles was to bring in the storytelling, the history and the charm of Triumph's classic range, the Bonnie range so to speak, to a more accessible price point and performance levels, and that's exactly what Triumph has been able to do with this 400. In terms of similarities, both the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400X are essentially the same motorcycle, and by that we mean that these are the same platform, so they use the exact same engine, the same gearbox, and even the difference in the chassis is very little. Now in terms of engine, this is a 400cc single cylinder liquid cooled engine. Horsepower is around 40 bhp and the torque is 37.5 Newton meters. Now this is an over-square engine. An over-square engine is an engine that has a much wider or thicker bore compared to the stroke, and this is something that we've seen or generally is applied to motorcycles that are racy, that where you're looking at performance, not something that you expect in a classic or let's say a retro neo kind of motorcycle. But this one, it's got an over-square layout. However, what Triumph has done is that they've given it a huge airbox, and even the plumbing inside the airbox is such that the length of intake has gone up, and that has helped with the torque, not just in the low end of the power band but also in the mid-range, and of course given that it is an over-square engine, the top end performance remains what you'd expect in a let's say a free revving, high revving engine. The gearbox between the two motorcycles remains the same gear ratios, all of that hasn't changed. What has changed, however, is the primary drive. It is a smaller primary drive on the Scrambler, which overall makes the gearing shorter for the Scrambler, and that should help its cause, let's say, when you're riding off-road compared to the Speed. So the Speed would, in a sense, at least in theory, have a higher top speed compared to the Scrambler because of the change in gearing in the final drive, and the Scrambler should have better acceleration at the cost of a higher top speed. Now in terms of chassis, both motorcycles run almost the same thing. The subframe is identical on both motorcycles, and even the main frame is near identical. The only real difference is the longer neck on the Scrambler. Design wise, of course, both the motorcycles are pretty similar. They carry forward the same design ethos that we've seen on the classic range from Triumph. So you've got the same similar teardrop tank and round headlamp, and the classic elements that we've come to know about Triumph have been carried over on both these motorcycles. So if you look at them from a distance, they do look quite similar in terms of design. Even in terms of features, both motorcycles offer almost the same stuff. You've got LED lighting all around for both motorcycles. You've got the same part analog, part digital display for instrumentation. You've got alloy wheels on both, tubeless tires on both, and even the tech in terms of suspension is identical on both. So they're both using upside down front forks and offset rear monoshock, so that the nature of how these work is of course a little different, but the tech involved is the same. Both these motorcycles also get ride-by-wire, and you have traction control on both, plus dual channel ABS. The two motorcycles are also quite different when you take a closer look. Now let's take design for instance. Of course, they have the same identical tank and the round headlamp, but when you look closely, you will find that the seats on the two motorcycles are different, as well as the seating ergos on the two motorcycles is quite different. So you've got, if you look at the Speed, once you sit on the Speed, you will find that it is a relatively smaller feeling motorcycle. So the space is limited, the feel of size is also lesser on the Speed, and the overall seating ergos are slightly sportier to go along with the Speed name. We guess. So you've got handlebars that are slightly lower compared to the Scrambler, and of course foot pegs that are relatively rear set. The Scrambler, on the other hand, has a much wider handlebar, plus the handlebar is away from you in terms of the distance between the seat and the handlebar, and the foot pegs are more neutral. So you sit on the Scrambler like you're sitting on a chair, and on the Speed, of course, you've got a more slightly more committed riding position. And if you're looking for a motorcycle that feels larger, then of course the Scrambler makes more sense because of the room and the sense of size that it offers, which is more compared to the Speed. Apart from the ergos, the wheel sizes on the two motorcycles is different too. You've got a 19-inch front on the Scrambler, which is a great thing to have if you like to ride the motorcycle off-road, while the Speed's got 17/17 front and rear. And there is a difference in the tire sizes as well as the tire compound and the type of tires that the two motorcycles are using. The Speed's got slightly wider tires front and rear, and of course these are grippier, so on the road they make for nicer, grippier, more feelsome tires compared to the Scrambler. The Scrambler's got a more on-off-road pattern and of course narrower width to help with off-road riding, but these seem to work on the road reasonably well too, and we'll get to that in greater detail a little later in the video. But of course there is a difference in tire sizes, there's a difference in wheel sizes to go along with the character of the motorcycle, and there is also a difference in the brake hardware at the front of the two bikes. So for the Speed, you've got a 300 disc, while for the Scrambler you've got a 320 disc. But the Speed gets sintered pads which offer better bite compared to the regular ones that the Scrambler gets, and therefore there is that slight difference in braking ability, in braking feel, in braking bite of the two motorcycles. The suspension on the two bikes, like we said earlier, yes, in terms of tech, the hardware is same, but the way these operate is quite different. Now on the Speed, you've got 140 of travel at the front. For the upside down forks, you've got 130 travel for the rear monoshock. On the Scrambler, you get 150 travel both front and back. So with that, you also have a larger front wheel, like we mentioned, 19-inch on the Scrambler, and overall this means that the ground clearance of the Scrambler is significantly more than the Speed. Not just that, for the Scrambler, what Triumph has done is that it's given it a longer headstock, like we said earlier, in the main frame. And that means mounting the front suspension has given it a sharper geometry. Now, a sharper geometry, helps with the response of the motorcycle, but of course it takes away from the stability, and you want stability as well on a motorcycle that you're going to take off-road. And so what Triumph has done is that they've given an offset on the axle to improve or increase the trail number, and the higher the trail number, the more the self-centering ability of the front end of a motorcycle. So when it hits something and it gets displaced, it will self-center sooner if it has a higher trail compared to a shorter trail. So the idea is, I guess, that you've got a 19-inch front, which of course takes away from the flickability or agility of the motorcycle. You compensate for that by giving it a sharper front end suspension geometry, and to add stability, because it takes away from the stability. If you have a sharper steering geometry, you give it slight, a little axle offset. So, but overall, the idea is, I think, to give it a good balance between road and off-road. As for the Speed, it's a motorcycle meant only for the road, for your city commutes, and of course to take it to your favorite twisting road. There are some other differences between the two motorcycles as well. For one, the Scrambler, you get switchable ABS, or you can turn off the ABS at the rear wheel on the Scrambler. You can't do that on the Speed. And there are a set of standard accessories that the Scrambler gets, which the Speed doesn't. For instance, the Scrambler gets a bash plate, it has a headlamp guard, it's got knuckle guards, and as part of the design, it's got a split seat compared to a single seat on the Speed. And now let's talk about how the two motorcycles feel when you ride them, when you get on board. Now, the big difference, of course, between the two motorcycles is how they operate on and off-road. Let's talk about on-road. On-road, the Speed is the better motorcycle, no two ways about it. The smaller wheels, the grippier tires, the overall seating ergos, all of it make for a very involving motorcycle to ride, a very nimble motorcycle to ride. And of course, it's complemented by that engine that you can use, which has a punchy mid-range, and of course, you've got a good top end. So you can really ride the Speed 400 hard if you wish to, and it presents itself to that. It makes for a good motorcycle to commute on because of its flickability, and of course, if you go over, on a twisting road, it's a tremendous amount of fun. The Scrambler, on the other hand, is lazier in terms of how it responds to your steering inputs, but the difference isn't as much as we had imagined. Now, when we rode the bikes, we've not ridden them back to back, of course, but we've ridden them at different times, and the thing with the Scrambler is, and we rode it again on a pretty well-surfaced and winding road. Of course, it's got a big front wheel, and so you need a little more effort on the steering, and it's not as quick to drop into corners as the Speed is, but it's still reasonably quick. It doesn't feel slow, it doesn't feel lazy, it doesn't feel boring in that sense. So even on the road, of course, the Speed is a much nicer motorcycle, more intuitive motorcycle to ride. The Scrambler isn't all that bad. Now, where the Scrambler scores is in the comfort area. We've already spoken about the seating ergos of the two motorcycles, and the Scrambler with its upright seating, its neutrally positioned foot pegs, its wider handlebars, it makes for a seating that like you're sitting on a chair rather than being committed. Not just that, when you look at the suspension, it's got longer travel suspension compared to the Speed, and even in terms of damping, it's a suspension that settles really quickly. So the ride is pliant, the ride is settled. And so if you happen to ride over roads that are undulating, that are broken, let's say typical Mumbai road, you will find that the Scrambler, even though it's not as flickable as the Speed, it is the better commuting machine because you're more relaxed on that motorcycle, and of course you've got that low and mid-range torque to access. Plus, with that revised gearing a bit, you have the response too feels better on the Scrambler compared to the Speed at lower revs. So it is a motorcycle that is easier to ride, we believe, even when it's commuting, and it is more comfortable. And that holds true even when you, let's say you decide to go touring on the motorcycle. You will remain more comfortable on the Scrambler given its seating ergos and of course the ride. So you're not really worried about hitting a bad patch, you're not really worried about not spotting a speed breaker. Because of the bigger wheel and of course the suspension travel, when you hit a bump or a pothole on a Speed, for instance, the smaller wheel will probably go into the ditch and you will feel that impact more, while with a 19-inch, chances are it'll roll over that impact, and so you don't get that sort of impact or jerk on the handlebar. So overall, it is the more comfortable motorcycle and the one that we'd probably say works better if you go out touring. And of course, when it comes to off-road riding, there really is no option. The Scrambler with its higher ground clearance and of course much nicer standing ergos just makes for a motorcycle that you can explore the unknown with in a more comfortable, more authoritative fashion than compared to the Speed. Now, in terms of size, of course, the Scrambler feels like a bigger motorcycle and it is taller and longer. The Speed is smaller. So now if let's say we look at rider sizes. Now I'm 5'8", and for me the Speed feels fine, but the Scrambler feels larger and more comfortable. But if you're a taller rider, if you're a bulkier rider, then the Speed will seem a little cramped. It'll feel smaller when you're sitting on it, as well as in terms of controls. The Scrambler that way is a more open motorcycle, and if you're a taller, heftier rider, we recommend that the Scrambler will suit you better. Even in terms of seat height, the Scrambler's got a significantly higher seat height. It's at 835 mm compared to 790 mm on the Speed. But here's the thing with the Scrambler. Once you sit on the bike or the suspension settles under your weight. And then you've got a waist that's quite narrow. So even with my height, I'm 5'8", I could comfortably get both my feet on the ground flat on the Scrambler. Of course, it's a lot easier on the Speed because the seat height is low, and of course the slim waist continues on that too. So if you are, let's say, 5'8" and above, Scrambler is a great option. If you're 5'8" and below, you might want to look at the Speed. So to summarize, between the Speed and the Scrambler, which one should you go for? So clearly, if you want a motorcycle that is more intuitive, more fun to ride, feels quicker, feels more involving, get the Speed. But if you want a motorcycle that's more comfortable, more usable, more do-it-all in a sense, get the Scrambler. The Scrambler is also the better motorcycle to have if you are going to be moving around with a pillion. There were a few things that you asked us in our reviews in the comment section about these two motorcycles, so we thought we'll also address these as part of this video. Now, there was talk about whether these motorcycles heat up, and no, they don't. We've ridden the two motorcycles in two different weather seasons, one in the rainy season, one during one of the hotter October days that we've been in. And no, we didn't find any heating issues on the motorcycle, so it's quite comfortable. Both are quite comfortable in that sense. There was other thing about the indents on the tank near the front of the tank. Why is that there? Well, that is to accommodate the forks. Now, the idea was that Triumph wanted the neck area, which is where the tank sits and then where your T is, that area to be as little as possible, because it gives the motorcycle a smarter, a more gorgeous or a more complete look. But to be able to do that and to give good turning circle on the motorcycle, they had to make room somewhere. So that's where those indents are there on the tank, so the forks can sit in there when you're turning the handlebar. So I think it's a good smart solution, because overall moving the tank closer to the T has given it that butch compact look that makes the Speed and the Scrambler look pretty good. Now, finally, in terms of pricing, there is a near 30,000 rupee difference between the two motorcycles, and the question is, should you spend that 30,000 more and get yourself a Scrambler? So like we said, Scrambler is for people who are looking for comfort. Scrambler is for people who are looking at touring alone or with a pillion, and who subject themselves to, or who don't have an option but to subject themselves to poor road conditions. The Scrambler is the motorcycle to buy. Yes, that 30,000 rupee difference in our book is justified. And just to give you an idea, I mean, I stay in Bombay, I've ridden both the motorcycles, and if I had to pick a motorcycle between the two, I would spend that 30,000 rupee extra for my daily commute, which is nearly 40 kilometers one way on these poor roads. And I would also pick this motorcycle if I were to ride to Goa or to Pune or wherever. It just is the more complete motorcycle in our book compared to the Speed. But like we said, the difference mainly is down to whether you want a racy feeling motorcycle or a more complete motorcycle. Now, I might have picked the Scrambler, but depending on what you've heard us talk about the bikes and how they feel and how they are to ride, which one would you pick and why? Do let us know in the comments, and if you like the video, give us a thumbs up, do subscribe, and of course keep commenting. It helps our channel grow, and thank you so much for watching.